In the world of Warhammer 40k, there are many good and evil things, but mostly evil. But if one had to put a pin on exactly what is the most evil and the true antagonist of the setting, well then you'd be hard-pressed to argue against the Gods of Chaos. For it's become a meme up to this point that every single thing that goes wrong in 40k pretty much has something to do with the Gods of Chaos. The most notable being the Horus Heresy, and the corruption of the Primarchs, and the Space Marine Legions, giving us everyone's favorite spiky buoys, the Chaos Space Marines. Yet wherever there is corruption, there is the question, can it be undone? Or in this case, can it be redeemed? The idea of forgiveness is not common in 40k, especially so when it comes to chaos. But ladies and gentlemen, that's what we're going to find out today, as we cover the only canon example of a Chaos Space Marine actually being redeemed in the light of the Emperor. So ladies and gentlemen, join me today as we take a look at the story of Demon Blood, and of the absolute adamantine will of one system of battle, the foul machinations of a demon prince, and the long and strenuous journey of an Ultramarine sergeant. But without any further ado, let's get cracking on with today's video. But before I can continue on, we need to first answer the question, is it even possible for a Chaos Space Marine to be redeemed? And is everything in Warhammer 40k? That really does depend. Do you mean the Horus Heresy or modern day Warhammer? For you see, way back when in the days of the Horus Heresy, it was actually quite common for Chaos Space Marines to be quote-unquote redeemed, but they weren't really Chaos Space Marines at the time, at least not what we think of. You see, in the Heresy, especially in the beginning, the idea of serving Chaos was not a thing for any legion, aside from the Word Bearers, but they kind of invented it. This was truly a civil war in the broadest sense of the scale. This was truly a civil war in every sense of the word. Oh, there he is, you little son of a bitch! Yeah, sorry about that. There was a giant ass spider in here and it's gone. I don't know where it is, so yeah. Wait, where the fuck was I? Well, you see, the Horus Heresy way back when, it was still very much a civil war in every sense of the word. It was one side attempting to claim the Imperium, not overturn it in the name of chaos. And we get plenty of examples of both loyalists and traitors switching sides. A very famous example is Brath Ashmantle, when he managed to convince an entire invading force of Iron Warriors to join the loyalist side, and they continued to serve admirably throughout the heresy. Whatever happened to them, I don't know. But this happened time and time again, all the way up until the end of the heresy. But when people think of Chaos Space Marines, they think about Noise Marines, Plague Marines, Khorne Berserkers, Tzeentchian Rubrics, truly corrupted Space Marines. Space Marines that have embraced chaos, that have been embracing chaos, and have been steeping in that bad juju soup for at least a couple of thousand years. That's what people think of when they think about Chaos Space Marines, and rightfully so. So the question is, can those Space Marines be redeemed? Technically, yes. Practically though, no. You see, it's this weird thing of, technically it is very much so possible. The Emperor is the God Emperor of all mankind. He is the one in control. So if he decides, yeah, your soul is good, it gets a scrub, you're right as rain. The thing is though, that rarely happens because the Emperor, until very recently, didn't move his big golden butt off the big old chair. And even then, that's only part of it. The soul can be redeemed, yeah, but there is no canon example of a physical Chaos Space Marine being in chaos for a long time and physically coming back and serving as an actual honest-to-God Adeptus Astartes again. That has never happened, and I don't think it ever will. It might be a cool story, but I think that would be breaking Chaos Space Marine lore way too much for GW to even consider it. Though GW has had no problem breaking the law in the past, but that's neither here nor there. And even then, in terms of the soul aspect, which should technically be possible, that is so incredibly rare. In fact, we only have two technical examples, and one of them comes way back when in an old-ass white dwarf, in which 1,000 Suns, Chaos Space Marine, decided to send his reinforcements that were going towards a Black Crusade into the warp and died. And again, we don't know if he ended up being in the light of the Emperor again. It's assumed, but we didn't get it confirmed. Not to mention, the main reason why this never happens, and why the idea of forgiveness is so unthinkable, is because it's the Imperium. The Imperium does not do forgiveness. I mean, hell, they call an execution the Emperor's mercy. They do not care. In the world of Warhammer 40k, despite the various many gorgeous color schemes for each individual army, it's very much a black and white universe. It's either you're with us or you're against us. You stand with the Emperor or you stand for chaos, or vice versa. There is no wiggle room, there is no in-between, there is no discussion, there is no compromise. And that leads to pretty much most of the problems that the Imperium faces because no one's willing to sit down and have a talk. Because talking is heresy. I keep on shifting in my chair, like looking around to see if I can see the spider again. I can't yet, and it's bugging me out. Ah, don't do that, the pun was not intended. So again, the idea of a Chaos Space Marine being redeemed doesn't even exist in 40k. It's something that is technically possible, but in all aspects, so much of it has to go right that, in essence, it's not. Except under very, very, very special circumstances. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings me to the topic of today's video, and the story which I'm going to tell you. That being the story, Demon Blood. Taken from the Dark Imperium anthology from 2020. This story has actually become one of my really favorites ever since I learned about it, because it's amazing. It essentially is the friendship of a sister of battle, a seraphim mind you, known as Aceron, or Ascaron, or however the hell you pronounce it, and a sergeant of the Ultramarine 2nd Company, Brother Castus. So, the Ultramarine 2nd Company, as well as a division of the Ebon Chalice, are sent to reinforce the Imperial Guard to destroy a cult uprising on a world. And everything is going pretty much right as rain. Combination of Sisters of Battle and Space Marines, yeah, they'll make short work of any goddamn cultists. But then, turns out the cultists weren't just making an uprising. They were stalling for time, and lo and behold, demons of Nurgle sprouted forth. The ritual had been complete, and the world was slowly turned into a plague world, ruled over by a demon prince of Nurgle, known as Parmenides. The forces of the Imperium were scattered, including the Ultramarines and the Sisters of Battle, with Ascarion and Castus being separated, and as they stand in the miasma, the sickly death that is a plague world, they are being tested of mind, of body, and of soul. Eventually, however, Parmenides would take a notice of the pair, and he would actually come to talk to them, though he was particularly interested in the Space Marine. Taken from Demon Blood.
What curiously small creatures you are, to present such a thorn in my side.
The words roared and rumbled through the air, thick with dark amusement.
What little bundles of ignorant flesh. I am Parmenides, called the Vile, chosen prince of Nurgle. I am the virus which the plague god sends to infect your mortal worlds. I am the festering in your wounded empire. Do creatures as insignificant as yourselves have names too, I wonder? Sergeant Castus of the Ultramarine 2nd Company.
The Marine replied in a defiant voice, as if he were trying to impress the demon prince. The horrific gaze turned to Ascarion, questioning.
I would not give you my name, though it cost me my soul.
The battle sister snarled and gripped her axe tighter.
Such a shame,
Parmenides replied.
But the girl I can understand. Her mind is most infertile. What has she ever questioned? They teach her, and she believes.
The corners of the chasm turned upwards. The thing was smiling.
But you, my man, you are different, are you not? You can travel across the stars, but you do not know what lies between them. I could show you, my boy. I could show you why your omnipotent emperor chooses to let his imperium of toy soldiers be corroded by chaos.
Parmenides' immense face rose up in a vast static tidal wave that surrounded them like an amphitheater of flesh. He gazed down on them from above, drowning them in his blank gaze. Sister Ascarion took an involuntary step back, then held firm. Sergeant Castus continued merely to gaze upon the corrupt being, his eyes steely, jaw set in righteous defiance.
Now ask yourself, who is in the ascendancy? Every year, more and more worlds are lost to you. No matter how you lie to yourself that the warp is held at bay, you know deep in that untaught part of yourself that humanity will fall. The girl cannot see the inevitable, but you can. And do you really want to be dragged down by the Imperium as it sinks? You will die knowing your efforts were futile. You will die knowing that you know nothing.
Castus shook his head slightly, but whether he was refuting the monster or agreeing with it, Ascarion could not tell.
I can give you flesh that will not wither, only change and become home to a civilization of pestilence. Do not follow the Imperium when it falls. With my help, you can crush it beneath your heel and become an Imperium yourself, my boy. I can show you what secrets this dark little universe contains. I can show you what it really means to exist in a world your Imperium is blind to.
Castus' face was set, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes like lightning. Ascarion could sense the insidious psychic worming that would now even be burrowing for his soul, but the Ultramarine was fighting it, trusting in the Emperor, refusing to bow before Parmenides' strength. Castus tried to hold his hands up to his face and block out the sights and sounds that were trying to change him, but he was pinned by great chains of psychic energy to the rock where he stood, utterly immobile, held wide open and totally vulnerable to the mental ambush. He tried to remember the years of training and conditioning in the temple of his fortress monastery. He felt himself getting more and more desperate as he tried to recall those words of steel that had been spoken to him by the chaplains ever since he had first set foot in the chapter's Antifectum. But they were all slipping away as his mind was dissolved by Parmenides' will.
No.
The Space Marine grimaced as he tried to form the words of defiance spinning in his mind. It was a new type of fear he felt now. He had known what it was like to feel the air shredded by bolter shells and laser fire, to anticipate every second the hot bloom of pain. He had become used to it over the years, until it was not a real fear, but an understanding of the constant danger that occupied a sacred duty to defend the Imperium. This was so different. Here his body was not at stake. His mind was the prize. His spirit, his very soul. A Space Marine should never feel fear, but Castus felt it now. A fear of change to the part of him he had always remained the same. A part of him that was sacred to him, in its own way, as the Imperium itself.
Domine salve nos.
He hissed through his teeth, grimacing, a thin trickle of blood running from one nostril. With a mental shrug, Parmenides cast a dark psychic mantle around Castus' soul, a vast, terrifying emptiness, crushing, draining his spirit. Castus knew that if he had ever been strong enough to earn the armor of a Marine, he would have to be stronger now.
Imperator in perpetuum in omnipotens in umbre.
Ascarion tried to drag herself towards him, but the very air was drenched with power, and she too could barely move. She felt as if she were entombed in the rock. Her ears buzzed with a low, savage laughter, and the abhorrent image before her was shot through the red flecks as her head pounded. "Never break!" she yelled at the top of her voice, unsure if Castus could hear her. "Never break!" Finally, between Parmenides' eyes, a shimmering psychic lance leapt out and transfixed Castus, laying him open, wide arcs of energy leaping off his armor to the rock, lighting him up like a beacon in the darkness. Every fiendish trick the prince could muster was poured into Castus' disintegrating soul. The crushing power smashed Castus to his knees. With an involuntary scream of panic, deep in his mind he scrambled madly, grasping for the memories that were stripped from him and were incinerated by the force of Parmenides' malice. Endless hours of battle blistered and died. The liturgies of the Ultramarines were blasted away from his memory, and below that, a past a childhood. All were flayed away and burned. The threads of personality that held him together melted in the psychic fire, until all that was left were the most base instincts. The flame left him seared clean of all that had made him a space marine of the Emperor. Castus was reduced to an animal with no morals, no duty, no memory of the almighty Imperium that had born him, and no faith. For those confused about what just happened, Ascarion and Castus had been on the demon world for so long that it had basically brought them near death. At this point, Parmenides shows up, and sensing how powerful Castus really is, because he was a sergeant in the Second Company, and he was a pretty good one at that, he essentially manages to ensnare him in psychic chains, and actually erases his memory, erases the medical conditioning, his own past, his childhood, his entire service history, everything he was taught, to essentially make him a blank canvas. It is only then that he asks him, "Do you want to join Chaos?" Only when he has nothing left. Literally nothing. Everything about him has been ripped apart. And knowing no better, he accepted and became the chosen champion of the Demon Prince of Nurgle. Ascarion, for her part, vowed that she would return him back to the light, one way or the other. Parmenides would leave her alive, and eventually she would be found by her sisters, and with the rest of the Imperium, they would leave the world. But before I continue on with the story, I just want to talk a little bit about this. I love this scene so much because it shows the main difference between the Space Marines and the Sisters of Battle. The Sisters of Battle are protected by their faith in the Emperor. Their faith in the Emperor manifests itself very much so often in literal miracles. That, most importantly, protects them from psychic shenaniganery. Whilst it's very much possible for Sisters to fall to chaos, they have an innate psychic resilience, and that is something that Space Marines inherently lack. And that's super cool to me, because Parmenides knows that he's never going to be able to corrupt a Sister of Battle like this. And he also knows that he's not going to be able to corrupt a Space Marine either, especially one like Castus who's so dedicated. But he realizes that if he can remove what makes a Space Marine, all that he's left with is a blank canvas. It goes to show that this Demon Prince really did study the psyche of the people whom he fought. A Sister of Battle would never ever dare to engage in anything at all. Just death and murder, plain and simple. They're stubborn, they're obstinate, but they're also trained like that. Space Marines, however, even salamanders the most humble, have their pride. To be defiant in the face of the foe, to spit out curses while an enemy laughs. That is what makes a Space Marine a Space Marine. And that is what they will always do. Space Marines are also more logical, well, except for the Black Templars, than Sisters of Battle on pretty much every occasion. Parmenides knew that if he could simply get the Ultramarine into a place where he can unleash their mental ambush, he can strip away his memories. And with him having been weakened so much, he would have the perfect opportunity to make him his champion. But Parmenides did make one single mistake. He left the Sister of Battle alive who had witnessed heresy. Not just heresy, but the corruption of a being, wholly, totally, and utterly, but not just any being, a dear friend of hers. And hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, and the Sisters of Battle are one fine example of a woman. Ascarion would rise in the ranks of the Ebon Chalice, eventually becoming a sergeant of the Seraphim, personally commanding at least 3 squadrons, and she would spend the next decades searching for Castus, following in trace after trace after trace, and over the course of decades, Castus would manage to conquer 12 whole worlds, dedicating them to the Plague God, and making them the personal fief of Parmenides. In the latest encounter, she and her Seraphim would meet Castus, and after a bitter fight, Castus, wounded however, would manage to escape. Yet true to the nature, she did not yield. She simply returned back to the Canoness and prepared for the next mission. But here we get a little bit of a glimpse into the Sisters of Battle. But the Canoness is like, yeah, killing heretics, great, I know, I understand, it's fantastic. But you are a Sister of Battle. You got to follow orders. And our orders are taking us somewhere else. Meaning that when it comes to Brother Castus, you cannot find him anymore. You have to come home. And here we see something super interesting. Ascarion doesn't argue, doesn't spout passionately about killing the enemy or anything, she just says okay. And she lies. Honest to goodness, she just straight up lies. And even says in the book she lies. It's like, yeah, I won't do it anymore, fingers crossed, Lamau. That's interesting, it's like, Sisters of Battle, they don't like betray orders because Canoness, bigger, higher, superior, more faith equal better. It just really goes to show how much she cares about Castus. And the same vein, we go back to Castus. And the same vein, but while she's thinking about finding Castus, Castus is thinking about her. More specifically, there's something nagging at the back of his brain being like, hey, she's familiar. Why is she familiar? Why do I remember her face? No, I don't remember her face. I should remember it though. What's going on? And of course, every time that happens, slimy, slithery, snaky boy Parmenides slips up. It's like, oh, don't worry, rot. What were you thinking about? I don't remember. Exactly. Hey, I need you to go here to this world and conquer this thing real quick. And so we continue. Ascaron would be continuing her search. However, after that latest engagement, Castus was laying pretty low, so she was having a hard time finding him. It was at that point that she would be contacted by none other than a member of the Ordo Malleus of the Emperor's Holy Inquisition. The Inquisitor basically rocks up to him and is like, hey, how you doing? Ascaron's like, what do you want? And the Inquisitor basically tells her, listen, I know you've been trying to track down Castus, and yeah, he's been a real pain in our ass, and he's getting to a point that he's making Parmenides so strong, we're not going to be able to ignore him or contain him anymore. It's getting bad. Ascaron's like, yeah, tell me something I don't know. I know where he is. Ascaron then questions why on earth is the Inquisitor telling her all this? And the Inquisitor reveals, you are aware of how he fights. You're also very determined, and we need you to take this virus bomb and go exterminatus Parmenides right at the source. In essence, it's information in exchange for a task. And aboard the bridge of his flagship the Defectio, Castus and Ascaron would duel. And Ascaron was actually holding her own, despite Parmenides blessing Castus even further. This was because she had mapped out his movements. Over the course of decades, she had literally learnt every single move he had ever made. Not to mention, she was at this point empowered by her own faith and very pissed off. But the key turning point was that Castus actually recognized her in this moment and hesitated. He felt uncertain for the first time in decades. This allowed her to deal several vicious blows and eventually defeat Castus, with one simple murder stroke away from finishing it all. But if she had wanted to kill him, she could have just deployed the bomb way back when. What she wanted was her friend to come back to the light, taken from Demon Blood. Ascaron looked down at Castus. He was at her mercy at last. Now came the part that could not be so easily undone. The speech that she had rehearsed all these years. It makes no difference if I kill you now, she spat. You are bound to the Plague God. If you die, your soul will join 1 billion others in damnation. If I let you live, you might have to wait 1,000 years more, and by then you will have no mind left to care what happens to my species. Parmenides offered you knowledge. Now you have it from me. You have seen both sides of reality. You have served both the Imperium and Chaos. But there is one thing you don't know. One fragment of experience you have not claimed. You do not know how it would feel to become righteous again. Castus looked up at her. He knew he would not live for long, not with his stagnant blood running so freely onto the floor. He stared up at her lined face and the strands of grey in her hair that he had once seen burning above him. You are old, he whispered through his time-ravaged throat. I did not realize. It had been so long. Ascaron switched off Axe's energy field. The air fell still. You have all the knowledge you ever will. You are stronger than any man alive, than any space marine I have ever known. But is it enough? It cannot get any better, Castus. It will only get worse. It might take thousands of years, but it will get so much worse. Castus felt his life draining away. He knew well by now the ways of death. He had minutes, not years. The words of this woman would not leave his mind. He had thrown everything he had believed in away to be one of the blessed Plague God. Surely he could not return. Ascaron was virtually unarmed now, but she knew Castus was harmless. Even if he wasn't dying, his thoughts were keeping him docile. There was a war going on in his mind of a kind she knew so well. You may think that you cannot be forgiven, that you can never be part of humanity again. But there is more than one path to redemption. More than one path. There is always another way. Castus had walked 2 paths in his life. He had abandoned one. Could he do it again? With the time he had left? Look what the years have done to us both. Ascarion continued. They turned you into an animal. They forced my faith away from the commands of my order. But all that time has let me come to see that whatever happens here, you will never be able. You will never have the chance to change the galaxy again. You have an imagination. Use it. Change your path once more before you draw your last breath. From here, Castus would be mended to whatever point he could be, and he would return back to Parmenides, apparently having slain his once former friend, and averted the exterminatus totally. However, as Parmenides would congratulate him, Castus would do something odd. He would shove his hands inside his breastplate and rent it asunder, and there it would reveal an exterminatus warhead. Its potent powers amplified by anti-psychic runes, prepared and ready to be detonated with the words In exterminatus extremis domina salve nos. The very same words Castus was trying to remember when Parmenides violated his sanctity of his mind and forced him into chaos. The final words of Sergeant Castus of the Ultramarines, now redeemed, were Damnato tuum, damnation to you, as he saw fear in the eyes of the demon prince, and with the bright flash of that light, whilst his body had been destroyed, his soul was in fact pure, and he went to join the Emperor by his side. So ended the life of Sergeant Castus of the Ultramarines, born an Ultramarine, and died an Ultramarine. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is so far the only canon example we have about a Chaos Space Marine, proper Chaos Space Marine, no corrupted mind you, being redeemed in the eyes of the Emperor, and canonically, his soul being safe. I really do love this book. Well, book, it's a short story, mind you. By the way, you can find it in the Dark Imperium anthology. I love it because it shows exactly what a Space Marine is, also what a Sister of Battle is, but more importantly, it shows that faith and friendship is stronger than anything else. Ascarion never gave up on him. Never gave up hope that he could be redeemed, that he could be saved. Never. And again, this is still 40k because there's no like super awesome happy ending, but the fact of the matter, the Sister of Battle was willing to talk to a heretic, not only a heretic, but an arch-heretic, and moreover, give him words of encouragement and tell him to stand up and fight. I mean, there was a deep friendship there, and that was just fantastic. I loved every little bit of the story, it's great, and it goes to show how a Chaos Marine can indeed be redeemed, but there are 2 factors that have to be present there. 1, you have to have someone offering a hand to him, like Sister Ascaron. You can't just have a random Chaos bloke coming up and just being like, oh, well, I want to be redeemed, okay. You need someone to offer him a hand. Secondly, he needs to want to be redeemed. Very tellingly with Castus, he didn't join Chaos willingly. He was essentially kinda loopholed into it. And when he realized what had happened, he felt genuine remorse. And he wanted to be redeemed. And if you combine those 2, you get a redeemed Chaos Space Marine. It's just fantastic. I could gush more and more about this story. Highly recommend it. An excellent read. It's just beautiful, wonderful, awesome, and utterly amazing. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you also very much for watching. Let me know down below, what do you think about this story? What do you guys think about the idea of Chaos Space Marines being redeemed as a whole? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Do you think it should be in 40k? Do you think it shouldn't? Do you think they should see more of it, less of it? And let me know, do you guys have any other weird, like, super odd mentions of a Chaos Space Marine being redeemed? I'd love to hear them down below. But I want to say a massive thank you to you guys for watching, but even more massive thank you to my awesome members and Patreons. Shout out to my Lieutenant GM members, Miss Eddie 3 Miss Majora of the Void, and Miss Tori. Shout out to my Sergeant GM members, Mr. Damiak, Mr. Warsmith Fireheart, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. Bowen, Mr. Sean R07, Mr. Matthew Merrill, Mr. Sergeant Cossack 68W173D, and Mr. That Guy. Shout out to my Corporal Gym members, Tremel the Math Kitty, Lord Rosarius, Tech Priest Toaster, Mr. Bowen, Shauna Smithers, Gentle Salamander, The Witch of Warhammer, Major Doshinet, Edward King, and Mr. Overanalyze This. Finally, but certainly not least, shout out to my Privateer members, Mr. Thomas Lawns, Mr. Ivan _ SPW, Mr. Monkey Man, Mr. Michael Ayeda, Mr. Diego Castro, Mr. Fortus Unum, Mr. CMDNA, Mr. Eric Massaro, Mr. Dom Marek, Mr. Ken _ Sakura 333, Mr. Adrian Van Vuren, Morally Bankrupt, Matthew Peter, Joshly 1320, Adrax 1, Mr. Ethan Elam, U7L, and Mr. Kiri Khan. Thank you, I love you and appreciate you. Sign up to memberships, get a bunch of awesome benefits, early access to videos, behind the scenes stuff, member only stuff on the Discord. Join the Discord, it's bumping baby, it's happening. And ladies and gentlemen, something special is going to be coming very soon, so keep an eye peeled out for that. It may or may not involve plastic crack. But whether you give your boy $1 or not, I will love you just the same. Mwah! But ladies and gentlemen, I've been the General Bradley 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, amazing people. Thank you so very much for watching. I'm sure to say hello to the boys and girls. And I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss, Rangers. Update on the spider, still hasn't been found, no idea where the fuck he is. I have no idea where I'm gonna be sleeping tonight.